So today, what I want to cover is one of the actually toughest subjects that has been part of my journey in terms of awakening to the narcissism and learning to live as a narcissist, but really as my true self. And that has to do with parenting. So for years, while I was parenting, because I have an 18-year-old now, and I've only known about my narcissism for less than a year. So, uh, for most of her life, I thought I was doing a better job than my parents did because I knew they didn't do a very good job of parenting. Even though I didn't understand these concepts, I knew it was dissatisfying as a kid to, have parents that weren't nurturing and so forth. Anyhow, I thought I was doing better because I hugged my kids sometimes and I told them I loved them sometimes and I was affectionate sometimes. But turns out that sometimes isn't exactly a great parenting strategy. So this has been a challenging subject because um, the foundation of at least my covert narcissism, I imagine yours too, is that we have a fundamental belief that there's something wrong with us. In my case, it's something wrong with me, and if somebody finds that out, they're going to discover there's something wrong with me and that I'm not worthy of being loved. So that's why I built this whole facade and keep people at arm's length. Kids don't understand how to keep at arm's length. They expect to, be close in. And so when I have challenges in parenting with my kids, it really touches deeply into that sensitive trigger zone. But at the same time, they're my kids, and I know that they're important to me, and I want to do my best, whatever that looks like. So my journey with parenting and narcissism really began in terms of awareness with my oldest daughter, well before I understood about narcissism, well before she did. But at a certain point in her development, when she became a teenager, she started to really, and I don't want to put words in her mouth, but my understanding is she started to really realize how dissatisfying her relationship with me was because I would come in close like she wanted occasionally, but then immediately I would disappear. And she didn't like that. And she would come to me and say, this doesn't work for me. I don't like this. Why don't you hug me more? Why aren't you affectionate? Why don't you call me pet names? Why don't you, reach out to see how I'm doing? And he's like, yeah, that's so true. And I'm going to do better. And then I would try to do better. But man, as soon as that, intense moment would end, I would kind of just go back to how I was. Even though I thought I would try to do better, I wanted to do better, I tried to effort my way into doing better. But the problem was that's just not really me. It just actually was, through no fault of hers, but it was making the problem worse because now I felt even more like I had to perform because that's the whole thing for me with the narcissism is when somebody's expressing emotionally or strongly with me, I get immediately triggered into basically like a panic, and I'm just trying really hard to figure out what to say to get the interaction over with, so they don't find out, my big secret that there's something wrong with me, and so, as much as I thought I'd try and put the effort in, excuse me, to being a more loving parent, it just actually was making the problem worse because not only was making it harder for me because I was actually increasing anxiety level when I interacted with her, but it also made it worse for her because I would go in and try and do a little bit and then back off, and that's actually worse for a kid than just a parent that's absent completely because she would get her hopes up and then it would get crushed, and then she would get her hopes up and then I would crush them again, not purposefully, but it's what just kept happening. And so understanding the narcissism and really coming to terms with what that has meant to me has really been a beacon of hope and opportunity in my parenting relationship. Now, I'm not trying to say it's all perfect and great yet, or maybe ever, I don't know. But what I do know is it opened a little door into a way to connect in a real way with her and my other kids, my two younger daughters as well, and really for anybody in my life, but them in particular, because we're focusing there, and that's such an intense, like hot zone in terms of that conditioned triggered pattern. So, what it looks like now when I am aware enough to catch it is, or what it began with is a conversation that was like, hey, listen, I get that you really want this certain way of being parented. And I'm sorry to say that I can't do that. I can't offer that. That's not me, unfortunately. It doesn't mean that I don't love you. It doesn't mean that I don't care about you, but it does mean that my parenting style is never really going to look like that, warm, nurturing dad that you hope for and deserve. But my version of care is going to look different. I'm not really good at that emotional response. I will try when it's right and it feels natural to me, or not natural, but when it's authentic. I'm not going to fake it. But what I will do is something like, hey, this is one of those times that you're expressing something emotionally or you're wanting, and I'm actually just drawing a blank. I don't know how to respond to you, but I want you to know I'm here and I'm trying. Now, that's not like the warmest, most comforting thing to hear from a dad, but what it is it's real. And it actually has begun to create a foundation that we can build a real relationship out of. Rather than me just feeling guilty about being a bad parent, which I've spent a lot of time doing when I've been approached and confronted with these things. But it actually allows for like some realness between us. And even though it looks way different than sort of the traditional, Hallmark movie dad and daughter, it actually allows for a real connection to start to occur. So that's really where the hope is. And the challenge in breaking the cycle is that these patterns are so deeply ingrained, and they happen reflexively. It's like autopilot. Um, and I'm just now learning to catch that autopilot, sometimes before, while it's happening, sometimes afterwards. And it's up to me to institute the discipline, because I want a better life. I want better relationships that are based on realness. So if I catch it after the fact, it's up to me to go back and say, hey, this is one of those times. I see what happened there. I'm sorry. If it was something that hurt the person, my kids in this case. And here's what was really happening. And here's how I'll do it differently in the future. So can we start from there? This is who I really am. And, some of the things I am good at is like strategic thinking, or looking at the big picture without getting emotionally involved, or problem solving. So if that's something that's useful and helpful in situations, I'm totally the perfect person to go to for that, because that's where I excel. But if you're looking for that emotional closeness and warmth, I'll do my best, but you're probably not going to get everything you want in terms of that from just me. And so, what my kids have done naturally on their own is develop other relationships where they can get that from. And so I keep encouraging that as well, and keep stepping forward as best I can when it's authentic. So I'm not just faking it, because that's like the worst, just faking it, or just like, shoving myself in a box that's not me, is only going to cause more pain in their world. And I don't want to continue that cycle. That I know. So, it's really about having the humility, which is a funny thing for a narcissist, to admit that I have these weaknesses or these failings, if you want to call them that. But I'm not going to let that stop me from continuing on as who I really am, because I think that that's really the best gift I can give my kids. Because, like I was raised by a narcissist, so were they. So they had all of that programming and example for me. And so I think the most powerful thing I can do in terms of like a legacy for them is show them the example of somebody working to make a difference, which is really my goal right now in all my relationships. Because, frankly, because I want to have better relationships that are more satisfying, less exhausting. Because I'll tell you, being fake and, operating out of that panic that occurs and just trying to get the interaction done, that's exhausting. And I'm done with that because that's just not a way to keep living. So keep in mind that breaking these cycles that have been going on our whole lives, it's not about ever being perfect. It's really about being present to myself, present to the other person, and being completely honest, even when what I have to say that's honest may sound terrible in some cases, or at least I think so. Like, oh, this is going to be, I find myself saying this a lot. Like, I know this is going to sound really weird when I say this, or I know this is not what you want to hear right now, or I'm guessing it's not. But, here's what's really happening for me. And here's how I can be present to you. And if that's helpful and it meets what you're up to or wanting, wonderful. And if it doesn't, let's look at how you can get those needs or desires met in a different way that really works for you too. So I wanted to cover that a little bit today. Excuse me. Because this emotional unavailability really stings for kids. I experienced that as a kid, when I was little from my own parenting family system. And if nothing else, I just don't want my kids to have to suffer the same way I've done because it's terrible. And I want them to have the best chance to have a really great life. And so I'm not perfect. It took me almost her whole 18 years of my oldest daughter's lives to get there. But here we are. We've got to do the best we can with what we got. All right, you guys take care. Hey, and if you liked the content here, subscribe, give a thumbs up, put your comments or questions you might have down in the comments below. Any ideas you have, your struggles, your challenges. I'd love to interact and learn from you guys. If you got something that's really working well about what I'm talking about, put it down there. I'd love to hear it because, we're on this journey together. All right, you guys take care.